Hey everyone. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Hi everyone. My name is Brianna Coma and I'm with Conservation Nebraska. I want to say thank you so much for being here with us tonight, and I'm so excited to learn more about tiny homes and granny pods with Corey. A couple of reminders while people are trickling in and getting started. Your cameras are all off and you are muted, so you cannot be seen or heard. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat box and we will go over them at the end. The webinar is being recorded, so if you missed anything or you want to share it with anybody, it will be posted on our Conservation Nebraska YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. Lastly, at the end of the webinar, there will be a short poll that pops up that we would really appreciate you guys filling out. It helps Conservation Nebraska to improve on future webinars and events. So, with all that housekeeping out of the way, let's shift on over to Corey Woods. He is hoping to create an educational granny pod with Metropolitan Community College, along with being a construction instructor there. So I'll hand it on over to you, Corey, to get started.
Okay, thank you, Brianna. So I have a little presentation I've kind of put together for you. So I need to pull up the right prompt here. I have some PowerPoint slides to kind of go through on what we've been working on. And then I have some pictures and things of the tiny houses that we've also been working on. So we can kind of go through this, and then I will kind of open up a discussion, I guess, kind of while we're doing the pictures. If you see something that kind of intrigues you after we get through this little presentation portion, I always encourage questions, just feel to ask them. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. So at Metro Community College, we've been working on a sustainable small house. It's been a collaboration with the University of Nebraska, Metropolitan Community College, OPPD, and MUD. It is funded by the Nebraska Environmental Trust. So the university players is Dr. Bing Chen, who is here on the left. This has been kind of his baby, if you will. This has been his design here pretty much for about 7 years. He's kind of come up with this idea of creating this sustainable tiny house and trying to do some sort of build with it. So he is a professor in the electrical engineering program and the mastermind behind this project at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. Brandon Kryling, who is in the middle, is an assistant professor at the university and the project coordinator for the university. And then Stephen Eggerling from the electrical engineering department also is in charge of the drawings for the project. So he's the one that's actually been doing all of the drawings and things like that for us as we've been building this. So what is sustainable construction? Sustainable construction is the practice of creating a healthy environment that's based on ecological principles. Sustainable construction focuses on 6 principles: conserve, reuse, recycle and renew, protect nature, and create non-toxic and high quality. The goal is to reduce the industry's impact on the environment by utilizing sustainable development practices, employing energy efficiency, and taking advantage of green technology. Although many different business sectors are doing what they can to be more sustainable, the construction sector is unique because it has the chance to significantly affect the way these practices are applied. This is because of the large amounts of materials and energy that the industry uses. So what are the different types of sustainable construction? We have construction techniques, resources, and building practices have evolved over the years, and with the increased interest in sustainability and energy conservation, new methods of construction that focus on sustainability have been developed. There are 2 things that go into sustainable construction: the materials that are used and the methods that are utilized. So what is a sustainable small house? In this project, we are focusing on 4 things: ADA compliance, energy efficiency, green technology, and automation. So Dr. Bing Chen describes it. It is a small ADA compliant house about the size of a studio apartment that is self-sufficient. That means it incorporates passive solar heating, solar electrical generation, and a roof collected rainwater system, among other enhancements. The sustainable small house will be capable of adjusting temperature, lighting, and other appliances automatically and by voice control. It will also monitor residents. If a loved one should fall, the resident can program the home to call their children and a 911 if necessary. This last feature could be what one developer has called a disruptive technology and could change the way some baby boomers spend their golden years. The sustainable small house provides an additional choice that brings them closer to their loved ones while having the potential to preserve life savings. So here are 5 slides of the house. The first 2 are the renderings of the exterior and the interior of the sustainable small home. And then the next 3 slides are pictures of the students and the SSH construction in progress. So this is an artist rendering, basically before the project was even started. This is kind of what their concept was. So what we can see here is we can see a corrugated metal roof, which I will discuss here in a little bit because we actually ended up using a little different roof system. While it's still corrugated metal, we don't have the traditional glass solar panels that you see in this drawing. So normally you see the glass solar panels that you see on traditional roofs and things like that. We're using one that's actually integrated into the corrugated metal itself. So the corrugated metal roof is the solar panels as well. So, and then the one difference you'll see is some of the window placements and things like that have been altered a little bit from what this rendering shows. This is a rendering of what the interior of the house is going to look like. So what they're doing is they're using a Murphy bed. And what this Murphy bed does, then it automatically goes up and folds back into the wall itself. So this is a way to conserve space. You can still set up a couch over on this left side and still maintain kind of having a living room as well as a little dinette area by the sliding glass back door, and still slide it down and have a bedroom and a closet space there to actually store your clothes. So it's taking good use into consideration of all of your space within this small house. One thing that we can note up here is that we have a vaulted ceiling. And this is actually following what we call a 312 pitch. So what this is allowing to do is it's creating an airflow. All of these windows that are up above are actually operable, so they open up. And Dr. Bing Chin is actually working with a blind company right now that's trying to put together some automated blinds that you can actually voice control. So you can voice control it and say, say something like, Alexa, shades in the back 50%. So it can actually go down on its own, programmed, and the blinds themselves will actually be like an exterior shading mechanism that will help the energy efficiency of the house. The other portion of that is in cooler days when it's more reasonably temperatured, you can open those windows and those will be automated, and it will allow the direct airflow coming in and then moved out through the bottom rather than bottom up. So it helps with the airflow going in throughout the house. The next thing we see over here on the right side is we see a little bit of the bathroom. And one thing that we have kind of talked about doing and that we reinforced the roof for is that since this is kind of being designed with the idea of retired people or couples retiring and reaching that kind of age point where either they're going to go into a nursing home or go into some other type of alternative dwelling unit like this, where that maybe you can set this up in the backyard of your house. So they're close to the family, but yet they still maintain their own independence. And the thought behind this is that if they wanted to install a Hoyer lift, if it became to that point where the resident needed help and assistance getting like to and from the bathroom and the kitchen and things, is that they would install a Hoyer lift, which is basically like a chair lift where the person or the resident could actually have help getting into the chair, and that way the kids or whoever the caretaker is not having to handle them or manhandle them to get them into the bathroom. They can work them onto this chair, and then the chair will actually ride itself on a rail or a beam up here mounted to the ceiling and come through this bathroom door and actually take them right to the shower and the toilet. So that is something they're working on, I think, pretty much for the future. So we reinforced the roof itself so that way it could handle a substantial more amount of weight depending on what kind of person was actually the resident. So here are some pictures of some of the students as we were building and doing the framing. So this was obviously after the COVID stuff hit last year. We actually had started in the spring last quarter, was our intention to start building it. And then the COVID happened. And so that kind of shut everything down there for the spring and the summer. But this was my winter class that we did the roof framing with. And so you can see we have the walls all up in this picture. We were going through the roof framing, which I'll discuss that here in a little bit as well, because that was a little bit different. Since these are actually solid rafters, 2x12s, the framing on this is a little bit different than you typically see in most houses today. So one thing I will note is that if you look very closely, this green wall paneling or wall sheathing that you see here is called a zip wall system. This is it's not relatively new, but it's kind of new in Nebraska. They broke into this market, I think, a few years ago. But what zip wall system is typically you have to have some sort of water vapor barrier on the outside of your sheathing to keep moisture out of the wall cavities itself, and then just keep it dry. So what they used and what we've used on this is we actually have a styrofoam insulation that has a 1-inch insulation right here. That's an added insulation barrier that's there. And what I will talk about here in a little bit too is what we call a thermal break. And what that allows then is a little bit of a thermal break from the exterior walls themselves, from convecting the hot and the cold all the way through the building materials. And I'll discuss that here shortly. It'll make a little bit more sense. Oops, went back too far here. Here you can just kind of see that we had the walls up. We were getting the soffit or the fascia and everything put up on the framing on the walls or the roof itself. And then here's the shot of the back wall. These are the 4 windows. You could see a little bit in that artist rendering that we had, and then the opening for the sliding glass back door. So the location, the house is going to be located near the baseball diamonds in Baxter Arena, south of Exarban campus of UNO near Center Street. So the exact location, if you are familiar with the Baxter Hockey Arena on West Center Road, and we have 72nd Street over here that's running down on the left side, it is going to be located up here on the, just off of, I think it's Spring Street down here. When you come through and you come underneath West Center Road, that's where you can actually come through to access this area. The university has been building baseball fields here over the last year and a half or so. So the baseball fields are located right in this area. And so the sustainable small house is going to sit up on the hill just above it and kind of overlook the baseball fields. And then another thing I was going to talk about was what we were doing with Sienna Francis. So in July of 2020 last year, what kind of snuck in the city of Omaha is, so typically in the past, it's pretty hard to get ADUs, which are alternative dwelling units, or additional dwelling units passed to be on a property. Now, California has kind of led the way for this and paved the way for tiny houses and alternative dwelling units to be allowed on houses. Essentially, an ADU is just like a guest house, if you will. So the city of Lincoln has already passed it and is allowing ADUs now in certain areas of Lincoln. And Omaha now passed into their building code requirements a section out of the building or the International Residential Builders Code that is a section that talks about building houses under 400 square feet, which is what a tiny home typically is. So they passed this now, so it has now paved the way for Omaha's first tiny home village. And the Sienna St. Francis house, who works with they're a homeless shelter and they work with addiction and things like that. So what they're building is they're building a little 50 tiny home community down off of Cumming Street, where Sienna Francis is at. And Metro Community College is working with Arc Icon, who is the developer, to build 7 of these 50 tiny homes that are going to go in. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk about this a little bit. There's good affordable housing as a growing need all over the country, and the tiny house movement is coming to Omaha at the Sienna St. Francis House. A village of 50 standalone dwellings, each about the size of a small hotel room, is poised to rise on 2 acres of mostly industrial property in North Downtown. Arc Icon Development and Sienna Francis House describe their joint project northwest of 16th and Charles Streets, the Cottages, as the next step toward independence for folks who have been thriving in their homeless shelter programs. Each tiny house will be rented and will include a kitchen, bedroom, living area, and covered porch. They will be part of a gated neighborhood featuring a community center with common laundry and bike storage rooms, a business hub, and offices for on-site managers. The construction program is currently working on a collaboration with Arc Icon to build 7 of the 50 tiny homes, giving MCC an excellent educational opportunity, as well as giving students the opportunity to be part of the construction of the very first tiny home community in Omaha for the homeless. While we are still working on all the details of finalizing this collaboration, we did build 2 mock-ups in the spring quarter. And what this is allowing is it helps the engineers examine the design before they're actually built. So specifically, we're building them inside the Metro Community College, inside building 24. So being that they're being built inside of a building, we have to take transportation and how we're going to get them to the site into consideration. So that allows them to kind of better look at these frames and just kind of understand what they need to do to transport them and get them set on a foundation. So I'm going to kind of go through some of this and kind of show some of the plans here. But if the last 20 years has shown us anything in the construction industry, it is important to remember the impact we have on our planet and the responsibility we have as an industry to lead the charge. And at MCC, we are doing our part to help pave the way with education about sustainable construction within our programs. So what I also have here is I just kind of have some different pictures. And I did have a little short video on kind of an alternative that's kind of being developed as well. So let's go into the pictures first. So these are some of our students. This was part of my spring quarter class. And this back sliding glass door got installed in the spring. And just to give you a little background on this door was shipped in specially from Germany. The door itself actually weighs about 1,000 pounds. It's specially designed for energy efficiency. The R value on it. So when we talk about insulation and R value, your typical doors and windows are usually down and around an R3.5 to maybe an R5. This back door is actually at an R10 value. So it's over twice to almost 3 times what your typical sliding glass door would be equivalent of. So this was a pretty big undertaking when you talk about each one of these glass panels weighs 500 pounds. So this was a pretty good accomplishment for this class to get installed. So they were pretty excited about it. This is also them working on the installation of the door. Typically, you're going to take out one side, the sliding panel portion, to help make it easier to put the door in and out and actually get everything set. So that's why that sliding portion is actually missing in this photo. And then we have a picture of our solar roof installation. So this is kind of what I was talking about. If we kind of zoom in here a little bit, which we didn't expose the solar panel portions just because we didn't want to risk damaging them or anything before we actually get it out. But as you can kind of see here, this is a typical corrugated metal, just like you would see on a barn or a house with a tin roof. It's just typical corrugated metal. What's underneath this white plastic here, this white film, is actually the solar panel. So rather than having a glass top over the top of the electronic portion of the solar panel, they have a new product that's kind of more like a mastic covering. So it's almost like taking like a clear sealant and just covering the entire panel with it to protect that solar panel portion. So that is actually the roof itself. It is all 100% corrugated metal, and it is actually the first time this product is being used in the United States of America. This got shipped over from Taiwan, and it's being sold through a German company as well. But the price on this roof So the panels themselves cost about $7,500. And then also the inverter, which actually converts all the power from the solar and puts it into the batteries and then gets connected to the electrical panel. The inverter and the batteries themselves cost another $7,500. So altogether, the solar roof portion cost about $15,000. So this is a picture of Michael Shanka. He is with Solar Omaha. He's kind of Omaha's solar guru. He obviously has been doing solar work since the 70s. He started a business doing that back in I think it was late 70s, early 80s. Has done nothing but solar power pretty much. So he's kind of our leading solar guru in Omaha area. And so he was kind of talking to the class here about the installation of the inverter. And that's what this little box you see right in front of him is. And so what this does is it takes all the power from the solar panels down or up above on the roof, brings it down into the inverter, converts it into power that can be retained in the batteries. And then from the batteries, it goes straight to the electrical panel here in front of Alec. So that is the inverter. And we don't actually have pictures of the batteries because we haven't put them in the building yet. And then here's a picture of the Cape building, which is where we're actually building these tiny homes right now. So if I zoom in here a little bit, you can see the two mock-ups that we have of the tiny homes with Sienna Francis. So these are very small buildings. These are half the size of what the University of Nebraska tiny house is. So these are around 250 square feet total living space. And this one is just a little over 500 square feet living space. So we actually have intentions of having 5 more of these in here starting in the fall and winter quarters. So we're going to have kind of quite the tiny house assembly line going on. Here's the backside of the 2 Sienna Francis tiny homes. And I actually have some of the plans pulled up here that we can take a look at. So I am going to talk about the tiny home plans here before I get into talking about geothermal breaks. Where are those pictures at? Right here. Okay. All right. So this is the Sienna Francis house. So the layout that you see, this is kind of what the layout was. So the first picture you saw with the 2 houses, that was the front. You can see there's like a little porch out here. And then the second picture you saw was from the backside. So that was a small bedroom. So you can see that these are relatively small. The bedroom itself is about 7 feet, 6.5 inches wide. And the building itself is only 10 feet wide, about 11 feet. So these are relatively small. It's about enough for a single bed with probably a little dresser in there. Then they have a small kitchenette area and then a bathroom and a shower. And then we have a little living space here that's about 8.5 feet. So when you actually stand inside of them, this is a room that's probably about big enough to have a nice sized, oversized recliner and maybe a little TV in. So it keeps that kind of a comfortable living space. They have a bedroom, they have a little living room, just enough to kind of get by. And that is the intention behind these. These Sienna Francis tiny houses are not quite being built with the sustainability in mind as we are doing with the University of Nebraska's. But this is also going to pave the way for allowing this kind of construction to transform and evolve here in Omaha. So since this is the first tiny home village, we start seeing success with this. I really think you're going to see this type of thing blossom, especially here in Omaha and Lincoln. I really think that there is a good call for it. So that's kind of the layout of it. Our sustainable small house, when we actually get inside there, a couple things I wanted to talk about. You can kind of see where the bed and everything was set up. So when this was originally designed and when we originally started it, the intention is that this little room over here on the right would be a utility room. And that's where we have the electrical panel, and that's where we saw the picture of Michael standing here in the corner with the inverter. This was originally intended to be a split room where the electrical would be on this side, and on the other side we'd have the water. So what we have is there's a water collection system that comes off the rain. The water comes into 5-inch gutters, and then gets pushed down into a series of 3 cisterns, and then the water gets purified and used within the house. So the intention behind this house is that it's 100% net zero and is 100% off the grid. So it does not need to be attached to city water or sewer, and also it has 100% self-sufficient power with no gas. So that's what we talk about with net zero. And then self-sustainability is that it actually does not need to be tied to the grid at all. So originally this was intended to have the water cisterns on the side of the maintenance room. But once we got into that, and we realized that the water cisterns weigh about a ton each, we realized you can't do that on a wood floor. They will never hold up 3 tons of water in water tanks. So they're actually mounting those water tanks below in the crawl space for this house. And that's where those will actually be. So now, after the fact, we kind of figured out that we could have turned this into a bedroom and made this more of an actual, like a little 1-bedroom apartment. So the next time we build one, we're actually going to do that, create this into a bedroom space. We have the bathroom and the shower, just like you saw in the renderings there, and then the bedroom, and then the kitchen itself. So the kitchen is just a small little kitchenette space. It just has a spot for a fridge, a cooktop, and a sink, and just a little spot to kind of sit with a couple chairs where you can have dinner with your husband or wife or significant other. So that's kind of the design intent behind that. And the reason why this house is being built is to actually, the way Dr. Bing describes it, is we call it the tiny house on steroids. So the intention behind this house is that we're way overbuilding it with the intention of monitoring the energy efficiency of it to see just how energy efficient you can make a house. So this is the, I guess you could say, the Bentley of houses. Bentleys are extremely expensive cars, so this is an extremely expensive house. So this is like a top of the line energy efficient house. So the price tag with this little house here is somewhere around $180,000, and it's only about 500 square feet total living space. So this has been way overbuilt, way more energy efficient than what you could do. You could really bring this down into an affordable means. I really think you could get this down into about a $50,000-$60,000 price range, relatively easy. But we wanted to build it just to see how energy efficient you really could get. The intention behind this is that Dr. Chen has talked about 16 candles. It was kind of a joke around with one of his nieces that he wanted to have her 16th birthday in this house, and that they would be able to heat the house with the 16 candles on the birthday cake. So that's, to give you an idea, that's how energy efficient we're trying to make this house, is that you could literally change the temperature in the house by lighting 16 birthday candles. So that is the reason why it is quite a bit more expensive than most people would want to spend on a tiny house. So the next one, let's see here. What I was going to talk about was thermal breaks. So the biggest issue with energy efficiency, right, is air seeping in and air seeping out, and then the convection of hot and cold from the outside temperatures coming through your materials. So what that actually is you're hot and cool by having a solid piece of lumber that runs all the way through the wall, and it's running through the nails, and it's running through the plywood sheathing with no insulation in between. That heat and the cool from the outside temperature is convecting all the way through and transferring all the way through into the building. What a thermal break is it is an insulation barrier then that comes into play that helps break that convection. So by putting an insulation barrier like they're showing in this drawing, they're showing a 2x4 stud wall on the outside with a styrofoam or a foam type of insulation in between, sandwiched in between the exterior, which is a 2x6 wall. So this is a little bit different than what we were building it. We actually built, this is an overview. So if you're looking down at the wall itself, they have their studs parallel to each other, right? And then they have the insulation running in between, as well as in between the wall cavity studs. So what we did is we actually staggered ours. So when we come back to this set of plans here, is we created a continuous Gotta find the right page here. Continuous insulation barrier by staggering our studs. So if you look very closely at this right here, we can see that we have double 2x4 wood stud wall staggered 24 inches on center. So essentially what we did is we took the 2x4s on the inside and the outside and we staggered them a foot from each other. So they were 2 foot on center apart from each other on the inside of the wall and 2 foot apart from each other on the outside of the wall. But if you actually look at the wall itself, you can see the studs are a foot apart. And what that is it's set back a little bit. So what that allows is that it creates that insulation break. So if we actually come back and take a look at this picture that I showed you with Michael in it, you can actually see that. What happened here? In the wall. So when we look very closely in here, you can see the first layer. So this is already the first 2x4 cavity, then it's already filled with polyiso insulation. So the outside cavity is what you're seeing exposed right here. So these walls are not fully insulated yet. So what that allows then is that allows that continuous lumber to be broke apart, and then it allows that thermal break. So that's what we were trying to do with most of this here. So get this back to normal here so I can actually filter through here. So the best place to place your insulation to help prevent that is to create a thermal break somewhere on the outside of the wall. That is also another reason why we use that zip wall system, is that helps create a thermal break, because that zip wall system sits on the outside. So if you remember in that picture, we saw the 1-inch white insulation that was attached to that green wall sheathing. That actually helps create that thermal break in the wall itself. So the best place to place it to create that thermal break is on the exterior of the wall. That way it doesn't actually transfer and get into the wall cavities and get into the house itself. So the idea behind a thermal break is that you're creating an envelope within your building. So you want to actually create an insulated envelope, whether it's on the inside or the outside. And so when we look really closely here, we can see that we see our wall cavity here, but they're adding an extra insulation barrier on the inside. So that's what they're using as a thermal break. So that's what they're calling an airtight envelope. They're creating the inside of this thing to be 100% airtight. And so they're creating an insulated barrier as well to create a thermal break. So the one issue that we had with the roof is that we don't have a thermal break set up. But I think what we've decided to do is that we're going to use a polyiso insulation and just mount it to the roof's rafters themselves before we attach the sheetrock. That will allow us to have a thermal break in the ceiling. And then with the use of the zip wall system and the staggered studs, then we have our thermal breaks within our walls. And then down below grade, what you find is that you have to have some sort of insulation barrier across the bottom. So what they're doing is they're going to put an insulation barrier below the slab on grade that they'll put down in the crawl space. And what that does then is it creates 100% thermal break to prevent all of that energy and heat and cold from the outside to actually transfer in through the materials to get into the house itself. And I think that's pretty much all I had. I do have one little video that I kind of pulled up. And I don't know, Brianna, did you set it up that I could share sound?
You should be able to, yes.
Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I have one little video. I think it's kind of interesting. It's a relatively new concept. This is a business startup called Boxable. So to really give you an idea of just how far this movement is really going, there is all sorts of things from the tiny houses that we're building to there's all sorts of videos on YouTube you can find about people converting storage bins. So like the Connex boxes that you see, the big metal boxes you see as on construction sites, people are converting those into tiny homes. And so what this company is actually doing is they are creating a foldable type of house that you can box up and make it easier to transport. So I'm going to just show this video. Like I said, this is a startup company. I think they're actually still seeking investors and things like that. There's several videos about Boxable here on YouTube that you can watch that are quite a bit longer, that goes more in depth about the construction of them. But this is a nice little introduction, and I think it's a great idea. The energy efficiency of them and the sustainability factors, I don't think are there yet. But I think this is a step in the right direction to make it, I guess, more accessible, a little more cost efficient. The little house that you'll see him sitting in and talking about sells for $50,000 shipped. So it is not very big. It's basically the size of a studio apartment, but it is relatively cost efficient. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and just kind of run this video. If you can't hear it, let me know. That way we can try to get the sound on.
Turn the sound up just a little bit more.
That's all the louder it gets, I think. Yeah, I'm full blast here. Can you guys hear it through there?
I can't on my side, unfortunately.
Okay, then maybe it's not gonna work very well. Can you hear it at all, or is it just really quiet?
I heard it a little at the very beginning, but then I lost it. So
Okay, so that might not work. So that's the loudest my computer can get. So I don't know if it's just not coming through the system. So what I'll do here is I'll kind of fast forward it so you can kind of see what he talks about transportation and the efficiency of it all. So what you can see here in this video, I'll kind of just talk over him. So what you saw right there is that this whole thing folds up into this little container. So this is a little bit better view of it. You can see it's easily transportable. The whole thing, I think, if I remember right, he said this width is about 8 feet that it all folds down into. So they make it quite transportable that it can go onto a trailer. It can go into a shipping yard and just get transported however it needs to. Here they kind of talk a little bit about the manufacturing of it. They have some portions here where they show it coming out and actually being unfolded. You can see they kind of move it in with a crane, and then they pull all the wrapping off, and then they drop the floor down, folds off to the side. The sidewall folds up, and then the two sidewalls come out. And then the roof actually folds into 3 pieces and then sets over the top. So you can actually see here now that you go into, there's a small little living room, there's a bed space, and then a small little kitchen and bathroom. Where the kitchen and the bathroom is at, that is the square rectangular area that you can see that's being transported. Everything else folds up into that area. The reason being is that way it is solid for the showers and the toilets and everything like that to transport. These are just some concepts and ideas of where they think they can take this type of technology by building these. If you watch some of the other videos, they have 2 of these units that they stack on top of each other. So they are being built to be stackable. So just like you see right here, they'll unfold the top one. And so they could actually do this in, a series of apartments, almost like a series of like a studio apartments. You could do it as 2-story housing. So it really cuts down. If you think about that, that's a house right there for $100,000, and you can move it anywhere you want and place it wherever you want. So it's a relatively cool concept. This is just kind of what they're showing for maybe their future manufacturing places, what they're looking at. So with that, I'll kind of leave that because that's about it. But I think that's a very fascinating idea, being able to be collapsible. The energy efficiency, obviously, just like anything else, they're going to have to work on that. I don't think that the energy efficiency is there, as well as, setting it up for solar power and self-sustainability is a whole different aspect. But, so that kind of concludes what I had set up for you all tonight. I don't know, are there any questions that anybody would like to discuss?
We do have a couple of questions. Peggy asked, what is your Sienna Francis project funded? It sounds like a wonderful idea.
When is it funded?
How is it funded?
So it's being funded through Sienna St. Francis. They have their own donors and everything that donate to Sienna St. Francis House. And so Sienna St. Francis is the ones that's actually building it. I mean, they're the financing it and everything. So I would imagine that just like everything, because they're a nonprofit group, it's all just done 100% through donations.
That's incredible. And honestly, the box house, I was just fascinated. I've never seen anything like that. So that was so cool. We do have another question. What is your favorite part, or what do you think is the coolest part of the sustainability within the granny pod?
I would say the roof. I've been most fascinated with the roof just because it's such a different type of solar panel. Everybody's been using these glass solar panels no matter where you go. Even like I think his name's Darren Dangenford. If you drive out, I think it's highway, what is it, 233 or 133 that goes north to Blair. Once you get up closer to Blair on the right side of the road, there's quite a few really nice housing developments that are out there. And you can see that there's one house in particular that has an abundance of solar panels all over their house. He's kind of the leading pioneer of solar here in Omaha as far as being used on his own house. His house is 100% solar. So if that's something that intrigues you, I would highly suggest, take a road trip out, just kind of take a peek off to the right side of the road. If somebody wanted to know approximately where it was at, I could probably give out the address. I would not suggest going up and just knocking on the door, although he does like talking about it quite a bit. But there is a house to actually look at, and that is the traditional glass panel that you see. So for us to be using these different products, and I think Tesla actually now is making a shingle that is solar panel. So I'm excited to see the new products that are coming out that are going to be able to be used as far as the solar panel, rather than that traditional glass panels that we always see. So.
For getting to unmute. That's incredible though. So if anybody has any last minute questions, definitely throw them in the chat box now. We have one more question, but otherwise a short poll is going to pop up on everybody's screen in just a second, and we would really appreciate if you guys filled it out for us. It takes just a second. And we do have one more question. It says, for the Sienna houses, how much does one cost? Just one.
I don't think we actually have a cost for that yet. The reason being is because the mock-ups that we have are exactly that. They're kind of a rough mock-up. And the issue that I would have about giving a price on that is because currently lumber market value is not what it typically is. So if you've done any kind of building construction in the last couple of years, you will have seen that $1,000 worth of lumber got you about 8 times the amount of lumber a year and a half ago than it gets you today. So I think as this COVID stuff and all, if you paid attention, there's quite a bit of shortage everywhere for materials, not just construction. I mean, cars, if you go to car lots and stuff like that, they're almost empty. So there's a lot of shortages. So that's causing prices to kind of spike. So I would imagine that these are going to be closer to probably the $70,000 or $80,000 price range at the highest point. And I'm just saying that because the lumber prices right now. I think it would be much more cost efficient. I think you get those down to probably about $30,000 if it was typical market for lumber. So, but again, that's speculation. So,
wow, can you imagine living in such a cheap house? That'd be incredible. I love it. We have one more question. Where in neighborhoods can these be built? Does it vary according to city?
It varies according to city and states. So pretty much cities have kind of control. So like I said, over in Lincoln right now, they have passed that you can actually start putting some of these like ADUs and things like that. To what extent, I don't think, like in the city of Omaha, if you were going to try and do it like in a downtown neighborhood where you have an 8,000 square foot lot and you have a house that takes up the most of that, I don't think they're going to allow you to just drop a house in the backyard and take up, an entire property with two houses. It's obviously going to be on something that's a little bit larger lots. So that I think is going to be kind of interesting to see how that actually comes about here in Omaha. There is a current group that is a part of, the name is slipping me right now. There is a small group here in town that's trying to work canvas neighborhoods about getting ADUs passed through HOAs, which are homeowners associations, and that's where they start. So they start through the homeowners associations, and then you get it actually into the city itself and get it passed. So that's kind of how California started, and now you can do these pretty much all over the state of California. And I think Oregon and Washington are starting to get to that point too, where you can do it. So I think we're going to see a huge transition in this, movement and mindset of sustainable construction, sustainable living, and even the use of tiny homes, I think, especially over the next 10 to 15 years. Just an example right now, we talk about houses, right? And lumber costs are through the roof. I just sold one house and buying another one. And so the cost of housing is getting incredible. Like the money that you spend on a house today, like what I'm buying right now, I could have bought what we would consider a mansion 12, 15 years ago, like for the money I'm spending on it. I mean, it would have been a very high-end house. Well, now, the affordability of housing itself is starting to skyrocket. So if you actually look into like New Zealand and Australia and France and some of those countries that have been pioneering these tiny houses, a lot of the younger generations are actually buying these little tiny houses and setting them up on their, their parents' properties and stuff, because it's much more affordable. Why go out and pay, $2,000 a month for rent when you can spend $50,000 and have a $400 or $500 a month payment on one of these little houses. So I really think you're going to see this grow a lot over the next probably 10 to 20 years.
I know we were talking about that earlier, and I was like, especially right now, just like what you just said, like with housing prices, this is just the way to go. So cheap, especially for someone who's right out of college like me. I'm like, how do I even afford? That's crazy.
Exactly.
So we have a couple more questions. What is the smallest pod you could build, and could you build it for a homeless village? And Rita also said housing should never be 2/3 of your income.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and they say the rule of thumb is 30%. I still think that's high for the reality of it. I mean, you can't even hardly have a vehicle for 30% of your income anymore. So how cheap could you get them? I'm not real sure. Like I said, I think that once lumber prices and everything like that get settled back down, I think you could be building some of these, 2, 4, 500 square foot houses for about 80 to 90 grand all day long. Very easily, and make them energy efficient where they can be self-sufficient and sustainable. So, and the important part about sustainability is that you have to understand that the investment is there up front. So when we talk about houses and affordable housing, what you got to take into consideration is the fact that these sustainable houses, while they might be, $20,000 or $30,000 more for the same size up front, but that money is going into the self-sufficiency of it, the sustainability aspect of it. So while you get, the government right now will actually fund you 25% in a tax refund if you make your house go solar, right? So you have solar installation on your house. They give you a 25%. So you're getting 25% of your investment back right away. And then over the period of the next 10 years or 5 years, the power bills that you don't have because you're self-sustainable and your water bills are not there. So it's paying itself off even in monthly increments that you don't really think about when you're coming up with that initial cost. So, and I really think that those prices will really kind of come down. I always use the example of these LCD screens that you see now. I mean, a lot of the younger generation, that's all you've ever seen. Well, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was all these big giant tube TVs that, weighed a ton to pick them up and move them. And the LCD screens popped up on the scene and they were like $5,000. That was astronomical. Well, now you can go to Walmart and you can buy a 100-inch TV for about $400. And so I think you're going to find the same thing going on with the technology of sustainability and construction and all of that. It's going to become more and more affordable as people are creative and make it more competitive market. So I hope that kind of answered the question.
Yes. And what do you think is like in size the smallest you could get a house?
I don't think you would really want to go much below that 250 square foot marker. When you watch videos and stuff about even the transportable tiny houses that are on wheels and trailers and stuff like that, most of them are not getting much below that 200 square foot to 250 square foot, because then you almost squeeze yourself out of enough room to have even a place to cook and go to the bathroom and sleep and still maybe have a person or two over as a visitor. So once you start getting down to that 250, I mean, you're talking like about living in a camper, essentially. So it gets pretty small. I would say comfortably, you could easily have a couple that lives in that 500 square foot range, and have company over and still feel like you can entertain and stuff like that. If this is something a lot of you are really interested in, I would suggest get on YouTube. There is so many videos about different types of tiny houses, and you get into some of the channels that are involved over in New Zealand. It's amazing what some of them are doing. I mean, they're building outdoor courtyards, basically like in between two tiny houses, so they can transport one in, transport another one in. Then they have little courtyard areas with decks and stuff like that they can enclose and create an entire living space. And then they can actually pick it up and then just go somewhere else with it. So there's a lot of aspects of these tiny homes that I think is really intriguing. I mean, and even for other people, when you talk about people like that are into hunting and things like that, you could take these modules and just go out into the woods, drop them off, and you can go hang out in the woods for a month or whatever you wanted to do. If you were going on a hunting excursion, or if you were going out hiking in the mountains, or if you just bought a small property out in the woods somewhere, you could just drop it off and it could be your vacation home. So I think there's endless opportunities with these types of building.
Oh, yes, the way of the future, hopefully. I love it. So
Sure.
Peggy asked, she missed it and she was wondering what was the approximate cost. I'm not sure which house she's talking about, but I'm gonna assume the house you're building at Metro.
Okay, so the tiny home that we're doing with the University of Nebraska, the price tag on it, we have around 180,000, with an overrun up to about 200,000. And most of that has to do with the fact that the transportation, getting it to the location where it's going to go, that's going to cost like 30 grand right away. Then we have some requirements that the University of Nebraska that has because of their codes and things that kind of inflates that price a little bit. But so that sustainable house that we're doing with the university is around 180,000, I would say. But you could scale that back, I think, very easily and get that down into about an 80 to 90,000 range. The tiny houses with Sienna Francis, we don't really have a price on that yet because all we did was a mock-up frame. And that was just to allow the engineers to kind of assess it and see if they wanted to change some things. So they don't even have totally like the interior finishes and things like that all worked out. But I think with the size of that and the fact that there's not adding the solar panels and the water sustainability aspect of water collection stuff, those could easily be down in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, just because there's no excessive materials being put on it. You're basically building a shed and making a bedroom and a living room in it. So
Yeah, I absolutely love it. It's, again, I just feel like it's the way of the future, and so I absolutely love it. All right, hope we have one more. Oh, Peggy said, thank you so much. It's so very interesting. And if anybody else has any last minute questions, definitely feel free to get them in the chat box here pretty quick. But otherwise, thank you so much, Corey. I can't express my gratitude enough for talking and letting us in on all your knowledge of housing and construction and all of that. I loved taking the time to talk with you. And thank you, everybody, for coming to learn with us. We really appreciate you so much. Again, my name is Brianna Coma with Conservation Nebraska, and I'll be sending you a follow-up email tomorrow with some more information that we talked about. So be watching your email for that. But otherwise, check out our Facebook page for more upcoming events, and we hope to see you all at another event really soon. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
thanks. Thank you.